Welcome to Eden Project. We are coming to you live from the largest tropical rainforest in captivity on Earth. So a really special place to be broadcasting from. As I said, I am Robbie. We've got Tom with us as well. Our plan is that we're going to tell you a little bit about Eden, just to get across the idea of what Eden Project's all about, because lots of people don't know. And then we're basically just going to go for a bit of a mooch around and look for some cool, interesting plants, some really great examples of plant adaptations or symbiotic relationships between plants and animals and fungi and things like that. I wanted to just highlight for a moment that tropical rainforests, have really ideal conditions for plant growth. Look at the plants that we're showing at the moment. We've got this giant bamboo above my head. It can grow like crazy. Giant bamboo can grow up to 40 centimeters a day. That's basically because the plants have got everything that they need. It's warm, it's wet, and there's really, obviously, tropical rainforests are close to the equator, so there's high levels of solar radiation, so solar light, obviously, high intensity, so it's powerful sunlight, which means the plants can carry out lots of photosynthesis, and then they can make their own food and they can grow. Having said that, tropical rainforests can also be quite a challenging environment for plants for several reasons, really. It's not called a rainforest for nothing. There's a lot of rainfall and plants have to deal with all that rainfall. They can get washed away, they can get waterlogged, they have to deal with things like lightning strikes, which obviously if you're a tall tree, then that's going to be something that you're going to be susceptible to. They have to deal with pests and diseases. They have competition for light. So if we look down here, sort of close to the ground, you can see sort of how gloomy it becomes. But as we go higher and higher, then the plants get more and more light, and you can see the light coming through the leaves here as we stretch higher. So getting enough light is a challenge for these plants. They keep shading each other out, and also getting enough nutrients from the soil. So lots of challenges for the plants. So what I thought would be quite cool is if we take a bit of a look around and see some of the ways that some of these plants actually get around some of these challenges. And the first one I wanted to show you is this magnificent palm that's in front of me now. This palm here is called the traveler's palm. And you can see that the leaves themselves, they fan out. And in the wild, they tend to fan out in an east-west direction. So natively, these plants would grow in places, well, Madagascar, basically, and they fan out in an east-west direction. And the purpose of that is so that the leaves can catch as much sunlight as possible during the day, from when the sun rises to when the sun sets. And you can see just how massive those leaves actually are. This plant in front of me here is called taro. It is actually edible. You can eat the roots, but you have to boil them up. Otherwise, they effectively burn your mouth due to the chemicals in the roots. So you have to boil them up first. But the really cool thing about this plant is the fact that the leaves repel the water. They're hydrophobic. So if I start to drip some water onto these leaves, you can see the water just runs off. The leaf itself doesn't even get wet. It runs off and it drips off the end. Okay, off these what we call drip tips, remember, that we were just talking about. You can see the water funneling really nicely off those drip tips. That's a way of the plant shedding water. So it's interesting because scientists have looked at these leaves under the microscope and they found out that the surface of these leaves, it's a bit like the surface of your tongue. It's actually covered in microscopic bumps, and those bumps are covered in sort of waxy pillars, and that repels the water. And it means that the water can't actually settle. It can't make a proper connection with the leaf. And as a result, it can move around on the leaf, but eventually it falls off. And if I turn the other way, you can see the Indian banyan tree, which is this one in front of me. If I pan the camera up, you can get a sense of this amazing tree. So this one's another really interesting one in terms of adaptations. These Indian banyan trees can actually end up being absolutely massive, and they can end up spreading out and covering a really large area. But if they're to do that, they need to make sure that they can support the branches that are produced. Otherwise, the branches will effectively snap off. So what that plant does is it sends down additional roots which come down from the main branches, and they grow downwards, back down towards the ground, and then they find their way into the soil eventually. This one's almost there. And then they attach, here's another one on its way, attached to the soil, and then they thicken. So when I look over here at this example, this Indian banyan tree, you can see that many of these, which look like stems, they're not actually stems, they're roots that have grown down into the ground, and now they're supporting the branches from below. And that means the plant can end up covering a really large area. And that's really useful for people and for nature because it provides lots of shelter and lots of habitat. So that's the Indian banyan tree. Here we go. I have found a beautiful flower here as well. This is called the clock vine. So this vine that's growing all the way above my head here, if I look down and go and look down one of the vines, eventually you find these beautiful flowers. They kind of look a bit like shoes, a bit like slippers. These stand out really incredibly to their pollinator, and their pollinator is usually types of hummingbird and sunbirds. So these guys have got the ability to actually hover and collect nectar from these flowers, and in return, they pollinate the flower and the plant can reproduce. So again, another great example of symbiosis, and a type of symbiosis where both the plant and the bird benefits, and we call that mutualism, when both parties benefit. Ooh, look at these giant banana plants here. Do you want to chat about banana plants, Tom?
Yeah, absolutely. Our rainforest is full of banana plants. They're everywhere you go. But in terms of adaptations, again, you can see that they've got really large leaves. So lots of rainforest plants have large leaves. It's all about competition and competition for things like sunlight. So that's one of its adaptations. However, those leaves also have a really amazing other adaptation. As tropical rainforests can be quite windy and stormy places, if the leaves of a banana tree were to catch the wind, it could really damage the plant. However, the banana plant has an amazing adaptation where those leaves will automatically shred and turn into ribbons to allow the wind to pass through them and therefore minimize the amount of damage that is caused to the plant through a tropical storm. So I think that's a really incredible adaptation. Those leaves are also waterproof, again, to help them shed lots of water. But yeah, really incredible large leaves that shred on their own. Really cool.